and get started in the interest of everyone's time. I'll just start with a short introduction. My name is Alex O'Hanlon. I'm the engagement manager at One Omaha. So I do support for and technical assistance for neighborhood grants. So I'm managing this mini grant program. So if you have any questions, you can always reach out to me. If you need any assistance coming up with project ideas or getting folks engaged, you can also reach out to me for like some brainstorming. And then I also do a lot of promotion for the Omaha Neighborhood Grants Program, which is another neighborhood grant that is going to open on January 1st. And that grant is through the Omaha Community Foundation and is for up to $5,000. So also, if you have any questions about that grant or need any assistance or want to do like project development with your group to come up with ideas, you can reach out to me for any assistance with that as well. So today we're going to focus on the One Omaha Mini-Grant and kind of the basics of how that works. And then we're also going to go over some general grant writing tips. We'll relay those back to the mini grant, of course, but they're going to be tips that are helpful for any grant writing in general. And then we'll also go over like the questions that are in the application. So if there's any questions about the application or wondering how you're supposed to fill out certain questions on the application, we'll have time to talk through that as well. We're going to go ahead and jump into the workshop. Again, like I said, we're going to do some stuff that's really specific to the mini grant, and then we'll also have a portion of the workshop that is just more general on grants. If you have questions, you can either put them in the chat, or even better, just go ahead and ask the question. I won't be upset that you interrupt me or anything like that. I feel like it's really good to just get the questions in as they come up. If the question is going to be answered later on in the workshop, I might just say like, we'll get to that. Or I might just answer your question and then also go over the same information a little bit later. So please feel free to jump in when you have questions, especially in that more general grant writing part. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And get into the presenting mode. Okay, so One Omaha Mini-Grant, it's October 18th, 2023. So just a quick overview of the mini-grant is that for this grant particularly, eligibility is going to be resident-led neighborhood-based groups. So you don't have to be a neighborhood association, you just have to be a neighborhood-based group. So Johnny, I feel like your group is neighborhood-based. I feel like Mode Shift is neighborhood-based in that you're really working on that neighborhood level to do your projects. So that is what a neighborhood-based group is somebody that is doing the work on the neighborhood level. And then when we say resident-led, obviously we're all residents of I think it sounds like everyone's in Omaha, except somebody maybe is in Lincoln. But we want to see resident-led means that you are leading this group in your capacity as a resident, if that makes sense. I guess like a difference would be if you're doing the job in the if you're leading the group in the capacity of like your job, as opposed to like, I live in this neighborhood, these are projects that I want to do to increase the capacity or to increase like quality of life in my neighborhood. That's what we mean by resident led. If there's any questions about that, let me know. So mini grant awards are up to $1,000. You can ask for $200 for your project. You can ask for $900 for your project. You can ask for $1,000 for your project. If your project is more than $1,000, you can still ask for up to $1,000 from the mini grant. So if you have a $2,000 project, just let us know in your application that the mini grant will fund about half of your project. So just so you know, awards are up to $1,000, and you can still have a project that's larger than that. Applications are open now, and the deadline for applications is going to be November 19th. We do have a board that is going to, or like a selection committee, that's made up of neighborhood planners, some of our board members, and then past mini grant recipients. And they will then be selecting, they'll select the awardees, and I'll show you what the criteria that they're going to judge on is a little bit later. Winners will be notified on December 8th of the fund that you've received funding. And then we'll ask that you're able to attend our holiday party on December 12th at the Benson Theater, where we'll award you your funding with like an oversized check, and it'll be really fun. We will ask for a really simple grant report that I'll go over a little bit more a little later, and that grant report will be due December 1st of 2024. If you get done with it earlier, that's totally fine. We'll just ask for the grant report by that deadline of December 1st. So funds can be used for purchasing supplies for your project, renting event equipment, providing food for events, paying someone to cook the food, printing costs for promotion, whether it's like yard signs or flyers. If you have somebody design a flyer, compensating them for that. So the last part there is compensation for artists or contractors. And so sometimes grants will be difficult about using funding for compensation. Our grant is a little bit different in that we love to see people getting compensated for their talents that they can bring to a neighborhood group. So you can totally write compensation into the grant. We just really love to see that it's going to be like a small artist or a local artist, as opposed to, you know, like if you're doing web design, and we'd love to see that it's somebody that's like on your neighborhood group that is getting compensated for bringing their talents as a web designer to the group. We like to see that more than a large contractor that doesn't have a connection to the neighborhood. That doesn't mean that we won't fund a large contractor that doesn't have a connection to the neighborhood, but just know that this is an opportunity to show some gratitude to folks that keep these projects going. So eligibility, your group needs to be based in Omaha, and the project needs to be resident-led. So resident-led, so that means that folks are acting in their capacity as a resident. You can't have received funding from One Omaha in the calendar year, which nobody has. So technically everybody meets that eligibility requirement. And you do have to have at least 3 people involved in the project. So the reason that we want to see 3 people involved in the project is that One Omaha, one of the things that we really look to do is to increase engagement. And so we don't want to see like what's called lone wolf organizing, where it might be one super high capacity person doing a lot. And that's great. And it's wonderful to have high capacity folks. But what we want to see is that leadership development, folks who can activate other folks to do projects so that those projects are representing many people. So for that reason, we do require that you list at least 3 contacts. So examples of projects that have been funded in the past or could be funded are community gardens, tool lending libraries, community events, so showcases, concerts, potlucks, block parties, seed saving events if you wanted to have one. Other ideas of like the types of things that we like to fund are projects that increase collaboration between different groups, projects that increase interactions between neighbors. So that's kind of like a block party, like just neighbors coming out to get to know each other is really great. But if you have some other, like if you want to do like a neighborhood kickball game or something like that, like we would love to see something like that. Projects that increase, and then also projects that increase residents' awareness of issues in their communities. So that could be, you know, something like if you wanted to, you know, petition the city to get more speed bumps in your neighborhood, or better painted bike lanes or something like that, and you're helping to raise awareness of like, this is a common issue that people are bringing up, and this is something that we want to do about it. So even if it was just flyering the neighborhood to get feedback from people about how they felt about something, that would be an example of a project that could be funded. So, like I said, we're going to have a selection committee, and I told you that it will be made up of One Omaha board members, past mini grant recipients, and City of Omaha neighborhood planners. And they're going to be judging applications based on some of the following criteria. So they'll want to see a good way to get extra points on your application will be demonstrating that your project organizes additional members of the community. So you could even write that in that like, we're going to be putting 2 folks in our group that haven't previously been in leadership roles in leadership roles. This project puts multiple people in leadership roles, which is another example of that. If the project identifies an issue and then seeks a community-based solution, that's also going to be increased points. The project seeks to uplift marginalized folks, that's also increased points. And then if the project is a short-term project that's part of an ongoing initiative for social change, we also like to see that as well. Okay, so that is kind of the general information about the mini grant. Or I should say that's the more specific information about the mini grant. If there's any questions, just like I said, go ahead, and I see there's something in the chat.
I do have a question from one of our community members in Minnelusa. She's wondering if we get granted, can you do more than one project and ask for multiple grants?
Yeah, you could. I would probably phrase it like Minnelusa Leadership Building Initiative has 2 parts: community gardening and bike lane, or something like that. So kind of make it seem like, like, how are these connected, and how are these connected in the larger vision of what the group's doing this year?
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Alex, I'm so sorry. This is Lauren. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Okay, so I'm not used to Zoom on my phone either, so it looks funny. But
No worries.
With that, to piggyback on that, so you're saying like if we have like subcommittees of a larger organization, but the subcommittee has a specific goal, say one subcommittee like that wants to like plant trees in the neighborhood or work with the Arboretum service, they could request $1,000 grant, but then like a separate subcommittee of the same organization could also do that for a different community-led goal. I just want to be clear on my understanding of that rule.
I would imagine that if the same group applied twice, even if it was different subcommittees, that most likely only one of those would get funded.
Okay, that's clear to me then. I just was like, cool. Wow.
But if you wanted $500 to plant trees and $500 to do like a soccer camp, it could be like park, increasing park engagement. We're going to do one event to plant trees, and then we're also going to have a soccer camp, because both of these things have been identified as something that would increase park engagement.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah. Any other questions right now? All right. Okay, so now we're going into a little bit more general grant writing tips. Definitely applicable to this mini grant, but also going to be applicable to neighborhood grants in general, and any small grant writing that you're doing. So I think first things that you want to do when you're getting ready to write a grant is to gather a core group of point people. So this grant, as well as other neighborhood grants, do require that you have 3 contacts. Other grants don't necessarily like require that you have 3 contacts. Oftentimes they do want you to list like core organizers or core involvement. So you want to get clear on that from the beginning. And then also, especially if you're doing this as like not your job, it's really good to, for the sustainability of a group, not put everything all on one person. And then additionally, we all have different talents. Some of us are really great writers and some of us are better with spreadsheets. So you might want to think about that as well as like, for me, if I'm writing a neighborhood grant, I love to do the narratives, but I always have to have somebody else look over that narrative because then it gives me the confidence to submit the grant. I don't love to do budget spreadsheets, so I always find somebody else to do the budget spreadsheet. So I'll get the grant going. I'll get the grant. I just need a little bit of support to help me submit it. And then I need someone on the back end to do that like follow-up budgeting and help me with the reporting. If I have all that, then I can apply for tons of grants throughout the year. If I have to do all of that for one grant, I would get burnt out. So I think it's really good to have 3 key organizers for the grant. And then you're also going to want to identify who else will be involved in the project, just in case the application asks you to list them. And a lot of times, like I said, applications will ask you to list them. I recently filled out an application for like, this was maybe like back in May, and it wasn't an Omaha based grant, but they asked me for bios for everybody that was involved in the grant. So I'm out there like writing short bios of all my friends, and it was nice that I already knew who would be involved, because otherwise that would have kind of been a roadblock that would have come up for me and maybe discouraged me from continuing with the grant. So it's just good to have those things ready and in your mind so that when you do actually sit down in front of a screen, you're moving, Okay. So, gathering core group of point people, super important. And then you want to be ready to receive funding. So for the One Omaha Mini-Grant, is there a question? Okay. For the One Omaha Mini-Grant, you are ready to receive funding. We will make those checks out to, well, I guess I should say you're gonna want to be ready to receive funding, which means that you're going to want to have a bank. Some grants will require you to have like a nonprofit status. If you don't have a nonprofit status, One Omaha can serve as a fiscal sponsor. If anyone has questions about fiscal sponsorship, follow up with me and I can send you all of the information about One Omaha fiscal sponsorship. I also manage that program. But for the mini grant, you're not going to need fiscal sponsorship, but things that you would want to think about are who's going to hold that money. You're going to get it as a check, so you're going to need to cash that check. If you receive, if the check is made out to an individual, that is a lot of responsibility on one individual. It could be that the individual receives that check, cashes it, and gives it to the secretary of the group, who then doles that money out. It's also okay to have like an organizational bank account. Sometimes, like, to have an organizational bank account, you need some sort of tax ID number, but you can also just open a joint bank account between a couple of people that are involved in the group. And then that could be kind of an accountability measure that it's not just in one person's account. So being ready to receive funding could mean a few different things. For the One Omaha Mini-Grant, you don't need to have any sort of tax ID number or anything like that. But you just want to think about, once we receive that funding, where is it going to go and what is our accountability measures going to be for that? Is there any questions about that, or fiscal sponsorship in general? Okay. And then the next thing you're going to do is familiarize yourself with the grant, whatever grant it is. So for example, if you wanted to familiarize yourself with the mini grant, we're having this workshop today. Otherwise, any grant that you're looking at, a lot of like grants that are for community organizations will have, Q&As or workshops to help people get familiar with the grant. Another way to get familiar with the grant is that you just sit down. Maybe you need to print off a copy of the application because you read things better that way. But you're just going to want to look through it, circle the questions that you're not sure about, and then do your research or reach out to people to help you out, so that, again, when you do sit down to write that grant, you're not hitting roadblocks. So for neighborhood grants, especially, you want to secure permission from city or property owners if necessary. So if you're getting ready to plant trees in a park, you definitely want to check with the Parks Department to make sure that that's going to be able to happen. One of the worst case scenarios is that you eloquently describe a project, you get the funding, and then it turns out that you can't actually do the project because you didn't have the right permissions ahead of time. So always want to think through that. So like if you're doing a block party or whatever, you might want to call the planning department and just figure out or public works, like, hey, what do I need to do to have a block party on my street? Is there any funding required for that? How far in advance do I need to ask about closing down the street? Just get really clear on those things ahead of time. And then this is just kind of like a personal tip. I think it's really good to create a shared folder for the process, where you can keep track of draft proposals, timelines, and budgets. So if you're working, especially in like a community-based organization, a neighborhood-based organization, it's really good that even if you have like a main grant writer, and this is another tip for like the sustainability of an organization, you have a shared Google Drive or a shared folder on, say, a Google Drive where you keep track of all your past grant applications. This makes it easy for other people to go ahead and like look them over if you're looking for feedback. Also, if you have like drafts of projects in the past, just because they didn't get funded by one grant or one round of funding doesn't mean that they won't be in the future. So it's really great to be able to go back and just copy and paste as much as you can. Another thing is, like, sometimes when you get in the zone, you're on fire and you're really describing your organization or the project that you want to do in like such a great way. To be able to go back and copy that in a future grant application, it's just going to make it easier for you to do more grants in the future. So having that shared folder is really great. And then it also is a leadership development tool, because say you're the lead grant writer for your organization now, but for whatever reason, like life reasons, or you're just ready to try something a little bit different in the organization, having that shared folder that the new person coming in to be the lead grant writer can look through, or you can review it with them, can be something that really helps that next person start on second base. Little baseball pun for all of you. So I think it's a really good way to share the work, but then also to make sure that newer members can get a little bit further in the future. Also, I always, when I have an application, I copy and paste all of the questions into a document, and then I fill out the answers there, so that if for whatever reason, when I'm filling out the application on like submittable or whatever format it's on online, if anything happens, the power goes out, my internet goes down, there's a glitch because a bunch of people are putting applications in at the deadline, it's not a big deal because I just gotta copy and paste again. I haven't wasted my time. So I always write my application in a document and then copy and paste the answers into the actual application. It also helps with grammar because you can more easily use like Grammarly or check your grammar in those documents. Any questions about any of these? Okay, so getting ready for the grant, we talked about having that core group of at least 3 people, and then you're going to want to decide on a project. A lot of times, so One Omaha can help out a lot in these ways. So for like neighborhood grants, we'll do visioning sessions, which is where we get together with a group and we'll facilitate a discussion around, what do you all want to see in your neighborhood? And kind of like help folks come up with a popular project that members of the organization want to undertake. So we can do that in a visioning session. Even better than a visioning session is like a 1-year strategic planning, which One Omaha can also provide that service free of charge to community-based groups, to neighborhood-based groups. So if we did like a 1-year strategic plan, we would go over like, what are the visions of the different members for this year? Okay, now that we've got these visions down, where are we seeing the commonalities? Okay, now that we know these commonalities, let's go over what the group's capacity is. Okay, now that we have capacity, let's go over what the budget to do all of the projects based on these commonalities and vision are. And then we could come up with, so you would walk away from that session or 2 sessions, depending on how we needed to set it up, with an outlook for the projects that this group wants to undertake in the next year and the budget that would be required for those projects. And then that would put you in a really great place to apply for grants throughout the entire year, and even maybe into future years, because you'd already have a lot of those projects figured out. There's no problem with wanting to apply for a grant and then coming up with a project that you want to do. But if you have projects in mind and then you come to grant applications, it's going to be a lot easier to do those grant applications, and the applications are going to be a lot stronger because you already have these goals. So if anybody is interested in doing visioning sessions, project planning, or like strategic planning, you can also reach out to me. I run that program here at One Omaha, and I'd be happy to work with your group on that. Okay, so you're going to want to decide on a project, and then you need to take stock of your capacity. When we're doing these side projects, these community-based projects, we don't want to get burnt out. So we always want to scale the project to what we can actually do. So what can we accomplish this year with this funding? It's okay to, if you have a really large project, it's okay to break it down into smaller phases. Sometimes breaking things down into smaller phases not only makes them more doable and keeps people from burning out, but it also makes those projects even more impactful because you're able to accomplish them really well and build up that engagement so that you can keep building up engagement and doing these projects as well as possible. So the example here is, if you want to start a market, instead of going in and saying, hey, we're going to do a weekly market June through September, starting in 2024, you might say, we're going to start with a once a month market in June, July, and August and September, and just see see what the results are, get feedback from the vendors, get feedback from the people who attend, and then we're going to build off of that in the future, which is a great way to do something. And then you always want to have a backup plan. So obviously you want this grant funding, but how will you accomplish this project without the grant funding? And how will this grant funding allow you to do the project even better than you could do without the funding? For some reason, funders always want to see that you're going to do the project anyways, and that the funding is just going to help it be better. So you always want to have that backup plan, because if you have a really good project, you want to do it no matter what. And then also a lot of projects are going to ask, like, how will you do that? Or some grants will ask, how will you do this project without the funding? And I think that they ask that question just because they want to see that you're invested and that you're invested, and that you're not just applying for the funding just for the funding. Okay, so thinking through your project. These are things that are nice to think through before you go to a grant application, because they will help you illustrate your project in a really eloquent way, and maybe like in a more impactful way in the application. So think about the project. How was it selected? Was it a group of people that came together and reached consensus? You probably want to put that in your application. What is the need for the project? I mean, most grant applications are going to ask you to identify the need. What do you hope to accomplish in the short term and the long term with this funding? So yes, in the short term, you're going to accomplish this project. And how is accomplishing this project in the short term going to help your organization in the long term? So we're planting trees in the park. That's what we're going to do in 2024. And the way we see this affecting our organization in the long term is that it's going to create shade, which is going to bring more people throughout the day, especially in the hotter parts of the year, to be able to keep enjoying the park. People will keep enjoying the park, which will allow them to come up with more ideas of what can happen in the park. So planting these trees is a short-term engagement project, but the trees being there is going to increase engagement over time because it's going to increase the amount of time people are spending in the park, that sort of thing. And then what are the benefits of the project? So for the tree planting example, you know, shade, there's a lot of studies out there now that have shown that, you know, planting trees reduces temperatures, especially in really hot times of the year. So temperature reduction, beauty, and then that increased interaction between neighbors. A timeline is really good to have. A lot of grant applications are going to ask you for a timeline. If we did like a project planning workshop together, we would create a timeline. And timelines are great to have for project management as well as grant applications. So you want to create a month-by-month schedule for your project. And it might be something like November, apply for grant. December, start planning. May, buy supplies. June, organize the details of the event. July, hold event. So the timeline doesn't have to be super detailed, but I think it's nice to just have an outline because A, the grant applications will ask for an outline, and B, it's nice to know where you're going so that once you do receive funding, you kind of have these steps laid out that people can start to participate in. And then ongoing maintenance. A lot of grant applications are going to ask, how are you going to maintain this project after the funding, after you've, you know, used the funding? So think about like who's going to be in charge of ongoing maintenance and how you're going to continue to fund the project. How you're going to continue to fund the project might be like, we're going to hold bake sales, or we've applied for other grants, or you know, we need this funding to implement the project, but then the project is going to be maintained by volunteers. So really important to create a budget. And I feel like creating a budget is something that trips a lot of people up. So budget's really important. Let's just go over some tips for creating a budget. So first, you're going to want to have a budget coordinator. This is possibly the most important role. A lot of grants require reporting where they require you to report your spending. So usually that reporting process is 6 months to a year after you've received the funding. So it's really good to have a budget coordinator who can keep track of receipts throughout the grant phase. So that way, when it comes to reporting, it's not a stressor. You just have to open that shared folder, go into the budget spreadsheet, and just start copying and pasting that information into your grant report. Budget coordinator, so important. And also sometimes, especially in like neighborhood groups, there's folks that can't necessarily make it to, say, the planting day at 6 p.m. on a Thursday. But as a budget coordinator, this is a job that they could take on whenever they have time. So it's a great way to get somebody engaged who wants to be involved, but maybe has time constraints that don't allow them to show up to some of the like work days. So creating a budget, come up with our project, come up with our timeline. Now we make a list of everything that we're going to need to do that project. So it could be like if we're doing a community garden, we're going to need seeds, we're going to need starter plants, we're going to need water access, we're going to need a hose, compost. Maybe I want season extension materials that I found at Johnny's. So making a list of everything I need, and then I'm going to research everything on my list online, or I'm going to go to the store itself. But I'm going to research everything is on my list so that I get an accurate cost for them. So I know that my seeds, I'm looking at all the seeds that I want. Okay, it's $200. A hose, oh, I can actually get a hose for free from my neighbor. So $0 for the hose. compost is going to be $50 a yard down at Soil Dynamics, and I'm going to need 2 yards, so $100 for compost. I'm going to go through, I'm doing this in like a spreadsheet, and I'm just going to fill everything out. At all the supplies that I need. And then if I'm maybe going to do flyers, I'm going to go, okay, what are the printing costs for the flyers? I might call Physicians Mutual. I might call Kinko's. I might see if I can print for free at somebody's house, or maybe I'm just going to buy the ink cartridges so I can print at somebody's house. But I'm going to figure that out. And then I'm also going to think through, well, who's going to do the flyer design? Maybe I'm going to put $100 in to compensate this person for flyer design. When you do your budget, it's good to have your own project budget that is pretty detailed. So that you know, because one task that you might want to give someone in your group is like being the person that goes and buys things. So if they have a really detailed list of what they need to go buy and even where they need to go buy it, that's something that is going to help that person go out and just do that job. Now, when you get to putting your budget into the grant application, you're not going to want to be too detailed, but you don't want to be too vague. So for example, you might, in that community garden example, you might say, instead of seeds 200, compost 100, hose free, you might just want to say supplies $300. But you don't want to be so vague that you're like project cost $300. So not too detailed, not too vague. You're going to make your own spreadsheet, make your own budget spreadsheet, which I kind of just talked about. I do have a template available. It's not like a super sophisticated template, but if that's something that would be helpful, just reach out to me and I'll send you that budget template. I think I sent it to some folks on this call in the past. So if anybody thinks it is or isn't helpful, that would be, you could let me know. Keep track of everything in the spreadsheet. So you have this spreadsheet and now you're going out and you're buying supplies. When you buy the supplies, so keeping track of everything in spreadsheet and then also having a designated place for receipts kind of all go together. I think you can tell that I've lost receipts in the past because this whole side of the screen is just me telling you to take pictures of your receipts immediately. Make sure you have somebody that is in charge of keeping track of receipts, making sure that those receipts are being kept track of in a spreadsheet. And just taking pictures of receipts immediately is so important. The worst thing, one of the worst case scenarios that could happen is that you get funded, you purchase those materials, you do the project and it's awesome, but you can't find the receipts to put in your grant report. And so now you're freaking out at the time that the grant report is due. And also you maybe can't cover those costs because, like, for example, the mayor's grant and sometimes like grants that come from like government agencies are really going to require like detailed tracking with receipts that show the exact amount of money you've spent. So whether or not a grant requires detailed tracking, great accountability for any neighborhood-based group, any community-based organization is when you buy something, take a picture of that receipt, send it to the budget coordinator, have the budget coordinator upload that into the spreadsheet. It's going to help with your reporting and it's going to make sure that you have accountability the whole way through. Lauren understands. Thanks. Okay, so grant reporting. You want to make sure, so this is like you've done your project, it was awesome. You want to make sure that you understand the grant timeline. Only ask for funding for aspects of the project that you can complete during the grant timeline. So I guess it depends on the grant, but a lot of grants are going to want to see project completion within a year. And they're going to want to see that you did the aspects of the project that you explained in the application. So that's where breaking your project down into phases can be helpful, because if there's parts of your project that you can't accomplish in that timeline, that's okay. You don't need to put that in that grant application unless they ask what the next step is going to be, right? So make sure that you only ask for funding for parts of the project that you can accomplish during the timeline. Be ready to submit a report at the end of the year that shows all of your purchases and gives a synopsis of how the funding was used. So you might want to, it will be like, you'll show that you spent $400 at Menards on tools and seeds and compost or something like that. And then you might have to, in your grant report, give a narrative of how you spent the money. And the narrative, that trips a lot of people up, but the narrative is $400 was spent on garden supplies at Menards. Garden supplies were used to build the garden, build the garden in the spring, maintain the garden throughout the summer. And additionally, garden supplies purchased at Menards were used to clean the garden up in the fall. You're going to want to track your spending as you go, because that is just going to make it so much easier in the end. So some of these grant reporting little tidbits that I'm bringing up right now are not going to be so important for the mini grant, because for the mini grant, we really want to keep the reporting very simple. So mini grant reporting requirements are simple. We ask for a report by December 1st, 2024. What we want to see is a narrative how the project went, how One Omaha funding assisted in the project, and 5 to 10 photos of the project. So the narrative is going to be like, we built a garden, we built a garden, we planted 4 different varieties of, or I mean, even better would be like, we built a garden, we planted 1 variety of tomatoes. We, saved seed from those tomatoes and gave them to the Blazing Star Seed Cooperative. 5 existing volunteers were engaged, and then we also engaged 5 new volunteers. One Omaha funding helped this project happen because all of the supplies that we bought were bought with the funding from the mini grant. Or One Omaha funding helped this project happen because it provided the initial funding that we needed, and then we were able to fundraise further from there. And then obviously we want to see those pictures of, hands digging together, or a bunch of people smiling with their arms around each other, giving thumbs up, and just that sort of thing. Okay, so those are sort of the general grant writing tips that I have. Are there any questions right now about more general grant writing? And then we can jump into the questions that are on the mini grant application.
I had a question.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you had wrote sort of bios for other members involved in the project.
Yeah.
How do you sort of want to tailor those bios? Do you want to focus on some emotions or like passions that they have, or do you want to be more practical and just list accomplishments, goals, and more concrete things?
So that is going to depend on the grant that you're applying for, right? If you're applying for like say like, a neighborhood grant, you're going to want to highlight these people's community involvement. If you're applying for like an artist grant, you might want to highlight these people's past involvements in different art projects. That project that I was doing, I was applying for an artist grant for a garden, for like a seed saving project. So I really highlighted how long those folks had been involved with the organization, kind of like did like an artistic approach to like how they approach the work. So because it was like an artist grant, I was like, said things like their process is this, their approach to seed saving is, is multifaceted, because that's the types of words that people who are judging artist grants want to see. If it was a project for like if it was a grant for like USDA, like conservation projects, I probably would have highlighted how many years of farming experience they had, what sort of research projects they had done in the past. again, if it's like going to be a project that's looking to support, if it's a grant that is looking to support like community organizers, I might talk about like how these people engage others. So it's kind of like I know who they are and what they bring to the project and why I need them on the project, and then I tailor that to the application.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. And so in some ways it's like you're being a little cliche, but they're reading so many applications, it's okay. They're not going to be like, well, this is the least imaginative, writing I've ever read. They're going to be like, thank you for getting to the point.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions, like more general grant writing tips? Okay. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for doing this because actually this is what we need. We want to apply for grant, but the problem is as a small organization, we don't have those kind of resources to hire grant writers and things. So we have to do it on our own. And grant is competition. So you will you will be competing with people who already have the feet down, have grant writers and things like that. So thank you for this workshop. Is very helpful. It gives us idea on how to handle the things when we're writing grants. So my question is, I'm speaking as a someone who has English as a second language, and that can be a big, barrier too for some of us who really don't speak English very well and want to write grants. So sometime in the grant application, it might say, can you describe your project in 500 words? That's, for me, that's sometimes the most difficult part because you have things to say, but how do you really summarize your idea in 500? So when they say that, what do they look for? What is the expectation on that descriptions?
Yeah. Okay, that's a good question. So obviously every grant application is going to be a little bit different, and you'll want to tailor your description to the grant application. But if your organization has a mission and a vision, that's a good place to start. So our organization seeks to, that's the vision, like our organization wants to see a world where, I think most of us probably want to see a world where, everybody is happy. That's the vision. And then our mission is the programs that we have, like what we do to accomplish the vision. So like if we're successful at our mission, then then our vision will come to be. So our organization seeks to create a world where everyone's happy. We will do this by supporting individuals, providing aid relief, and creating awareness, right? So those are like but it's whatever your programming is. So like, I think One Omaha, our vision is that Omaha is a city full of thriving neighborhoods with engaged residents. That's our vision. Our mission is that we support thriving neighborhoods through education, training, and engagement. So that's our programming. We have engagement programming, we have educational programming, and we have training. So that's a good place to start with what your organization, describing your organization in 500 words. And then another thing you might want to add is like a short history of your organization. So we were founded in 2017. by who are the founders, and why. That's the vision, to create the vision. So we were founded at this point by who, for what purpose. These are the things that we're doing to accomplish that purpose. So I would say a good place to start would be create a short history of your group, create a vision statement, and create a mission statement. Put those things together and try to get them to be about 350 words. And then you'll always have, because a lot of times it is 500 words. And then you have that extra 150 words to tweak to the grant application. So you could add something in, like if the grant is specifically about, I don't know, tree planting, how your organization is going to do that. So a lot of times a good thing also to do with a grant application is to look up the organization that's doing the funding and see what their mission and vision is. And that could be something that you tweak with those extra 150 words. Talk about how your organization aligns with the mission and vision of the funding organization. And also One Omaha does provide like services where we help folks craft mission and vision statements. So I feel like that's a really good question. I feel like doing the things I just said is kind of a lot to do. And if you would want any like support or just to like talk through it a little bit more at some time, like I'd be happy to do that more.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions right now? All right. I'll keep going. Okay. So, whoops. I don't know how to go back without going out. Sorry. Let me just. Okay. Darn it. I went to. Okay, so going into the mini grant application questions. First, we're going to ask you to list 3 contacts. Then we're going to ask you what the name of your project is. If it's cute, that's just fun. So if you come up with fun names, I think that would be really great. But generally the name of your project, it could just be like tree planting in Gifford Park, community garden in Minilusa, or it could be like food for all in Minilusa, which would be fun. And maybe like the 4 is like the number 4. I don't know. And then we've got a question where we ask you to tell us about your organization. So what we want to see in that question is how long have you been working together? How many folks are involved, and what kind of projects do you typically do? So we are a neighborhood association that has been active for 25 years. We host coffees every Sunday and recently have started walking tours of the neighborhood. Something like that would be great. And then we're going to ask you, and so we're just looking for like 3 to 5 sentences there. Then we're going to ask you to tell us about your project. So like who's doing the project? It could be a subcommittee of the Gifford Park Neighborhood Association. It could be members of Black Folks Who Garden. It could be just, everybody involved in the group. What is the project? So tell us that. In this one, when we're asking you about the timeline, we just want to see like, so the project is going to be tree planting. We're going to gather supplies. We're going to brainstorm the types of trees that we want to see in the winter. We're going to plant trees in April, and then we're going to do some fall pruning in September. So we don't need a detailed timeline, but we just want to see like what sort of scale you're working on. Where is the project going to take place? And why will it be impactful? So I think we've kind of talked through some of that stuff already. And then the next question is going to be explain how your project will strengthen the community you intend to serve. So that's kind of just expanding on that. Why will your project be impactful? What are the positive outcomes of this project going to be, and for whom? And then who are the key partners, key community partners? You don't need to have partners for this grant. Some grants do require to see collaboration. This grant does not, but if you're collaborating with other groups, we love to see that. So definitely if you are collaborating, write that in there because that's going to be something that the selection committee is going to take into account. So how are our grant funds going to help you accomplish this project? So this is where we're looking for that budget narrative. Like we are going to use funding from One Omaha to buy supplies for the garden, compensate an artist for the flyers, and pay for printing the flyers. Without this money, or this money is going to allow us to grow more varieties in the garden, put in a larger garden, and through the funding for the printing, we're going to be able to reach out to more people so that more people know about the garden and can come to enjoy it. This is going to increase the impact of the project in these ways. And then below that, we're going to want to see like your budget more specifically. So not the narrative, but something more like we're going to spend $400 on seeds, $150 on promotion. Total project costs are $550. So again, it doesn't need to be so detailed that it's like seeds, $50, compost, $100, but just supplies, $150, promotion, $150, total project budget, $300. And that's the mini grant application. So it's just a few questions. If you have any questions while you're going over the application, you can always shoot me an email. It's pretty straightforward and you can ask for up to $1,000. I'm going to send these slides out later, but this is my email. The grant writing tips, we wrote a blog with all of these tips on them. So I have a link to that grant writing tips. And then there's also a link to the mini grant application here. There is going to be a, there's going to be a recording of this workshop up on our website. And then I'm going to follow up tomorrow and send you these slides as well. That being said, any questions right now? No? All right. Well, I don't know. I appreciate you all coming out and taking the time to attend this workshop. We are going to have more workshops like this in the future, but they're like almost exactly like this. So if you have any questions or want to go deeper into any of like the grant writing concepts, oh yeah, somebody have a question?
I
Oh,
just
this
wanted to
is
say
Lauren. I
thank
just want,
you.
yes, and I did too. I'm so sorry, Alex. I wanted to just say thank you so much for this because it's a lot to absorb, but you gave some really good tips.